Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US Vice President J.D. Vance have welcomed the progress in the India-US bilateral trade agreement efforts to enhance. They're also to talk about enhancement of cooperation in energy, in defense and in strategic technologies. So President Donald Trump will be visiting India later this year for the Quad Summit. India is hosting the Quad Summit. What does this indicate, the visit of the US Vice President right now and of President Trump later this year, about the trajectory of the India-US relationship in the short term, in the medium term and in the long term? How will this region and the world view this? India's former ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Taranjeet Sandhu, and strategic affairs analyst Professor Brahma Chilani, they join me to decode the first leg of the US Vice President J.D. Vance's visit. There's also a personal leg and a component in Jaipur and in Agra, but even at the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg residence of the Prime Minister, the second lady, Usha Chilikuri Vance, and the 3 children dressed in their formal attire. The Prime Minister showed them around his house and his gardens. All of that and much more we discuss. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines at 10. In the United States, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi says the Election Commission is compromised. Something is very wrong with the system. BJP hits out at Rahul Gandhi, accuses him of defaming India on foreign soil. BJP MP Nishikant Dubey attacks former Chief Election Commissioner over Waqf Act criticism. Says Dr. S.Y. Qureshi was a Muslim commissioner. Qureshi hits back, says, judged by work, not by religion. BJP distances itself from Nishikant Dubey's remarks. Wife of former Karnataka DGP confesses to murder. The murder weapon has also been recovered. India Today accesses the wife's WhatsApp chats. China warns against trade deals with the US at Beijing's expense, promises countermeasures. China slams the tariff escalation, says US is bargaining with the tiger for its skin. Pope Francis dies the day after Easter at 88 years after prolonged illness. The head of the worldwide Catholic Church is no more. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US Vice President J.D. Vance welcomed what the government has described as significant progress in the negotiations for a mutually beneficial India-US bilateral trade agreement focused on the welfare of the people of the two countries. Now, during this bilateral meeting at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg residence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister and the US Vice President noted continued efforts towards enhancing cooperation in energy, defense and strategic technology. So these are key focus areas, and then of course there are other areas of interest. The two leaders also exchanged views on various regional and global issues of mutual interest, and this is significant. They've called upon for dialogue and diplomacy. Dialogue and diplomacy as a way forward to address any ongoing issues. J.D. Vance, his wife Usha Vance and their 3 children met Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg residence. Watch those images while this was the formal leg of the visit, but the dinner was at the Prime Minister's residence. And this sends out a message of the warmth and the personal ties between the Prime Minister and the US Vice President and his family. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has met them twice in the past, once in Paris at the AI Summit and then again in the United States of America. Watch these images as the Prime Minister showed them around his house and the garden. The Prime Minister showed them as you see in these images, the garden, the area where they feed birds, there was a peacock in the garden, and then, of course, the Prime Minister's residence. Usha Vance, incidentally, as our viewers well know, is of Indian origin, shared a warm exchange with the Prime Minister, and this kind of blends personal connection with global diplomacy. So the peacock is India's national bird. There was a peacock in the Prime Minister's residence. More pankhi being presented to these little children, also telling the Prime Minister, in a way, telling them that this was also or can be used as a pen. But look at that warm hug, the warmth in the relationship. In a way, India investing even in future leadership in the United States of America, as India has done in the past with UAE, with Saudi Arabia. It's a significant message that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is sending across. Professor Brahma Chilani, a very well-respected strategic affairs analyst, joins me on this special broadcast. Professor Chilani, how would you view these beautiful images and the hard-nosed diplomacy that's going on behind the scenes to at least reach phase 1 of that bilateral trade agreement by fall? How would you describe the trajectory of the India-US relationship?
It has been quite transformative since October. In October, the relationship between the two countries was under increasing strain. The Joe Biden administration was playing the Khalistan card against India, the human rights card against India, and also using indictments to bring the Modi government under pressure. And then in a few months, we have seen how this relationship has fundamentally transformed in a positive direction. In fact, Vance's visit signals a new chapter in the relationship. It's clear that the Biden-era drift is being reversed. The Trump administration has cast Vance's India trip as a key diplomatic mission aimed at strengthening strategic and economic ties with India. So there's a clear shift in the US attitude towards India with the change of administration. And if Trump realizes his goal of ending the war in Ukraine, his administration will shift America's strategic focus from Europe to the Indo-Pacific, making the relationship with India even more critical for the success of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Yes.
That's a very, very important point that you're making, and all indications do appear to be that shift from the Russia-Ukraine conflict to the situation in the Indo-Pacific. And that's the question I was coming to, sir, that Vice President is here, the US Vice President is here right now. The US President is expected in India later this year for the Quad Summit that India hosts this year. Last year was, of course, our turn, but because President Biden wanted to host it, so India gets our turn this year. How does that relationship move forward? And would that bilateral trade agreement or phase 1 of that bilateral trade agreement, in your appreciation, be concluded in the next 90 days or by fall and before President Trump's visit to India?
Well, let's look at the larger context. In recent months alone, since Trump returned to the White House, there have been a series of bilateral visits and engagements. We had Modi visiting the White House in the second week of February. We had the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, coming to New Delhi. And now Vance's visit, this will be followed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit to India by June, most likely, and then Trump himself coming in the fall for the Quad Summit, as you mentioned. So clearly, there is this renewed vigor in the relationship. And of course, the personal rapport between Trump and Modi has proven durable. And that personal rapport has been instrumental in restoring the relationship, in reviving the relationship from, the relationship had frayed very clearly under Biden. And now that relationship has been restored. But of course, there are several differences that remain. Trade remains a flashpoint. This does not mean that tensions remain. That in fact, the tensions that flared under Biden are beginning to ease. But on trade, difficult negotiations are still ahead. And I think that one has to keep in mind that Trump's America First agenda often collides with Modi's Make in India initiative. And in a way, Modi, reminded Trump at the White House about their parallel but divergent paths when he borrowed from Trump's own slogan by vowing to make India great again. So we've had this, the tensions have eased, but there are certain issues that need to be ironed out. Also, U.S. policies toward India's neighborhood, they have to become a bit more aligned with India's interests. Right now,
that's the point. That's the point I want you to weigh in on, when it comes to Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, rise of radicalism in Bangladesh, what the Biden administration was doing in terms of that regime change operation. So beyond the optics, how does it show its India, either in favor of India, if not openly and directly India first, when it comes to neighborhood and a very difficult neighborhood? I'll come to China in just a moment, but Pakistan and Bangladesh first, sir.
See, if the US and India are to coordinate effectively in the Indo-Pacific to help counter China's aggressive expansionism, they must reconcile their policies towards India's neighborhood. They can't be working at cross purposes, or the US shouldn't be working in a way that is antithetical to India's core interests in India's own neighborhood. So we have seen how under Biden, the US was aiding military-backed regimes in Pakistan and Bangladesh while trying to overthrow Myanmar's military regime. And all these policies that we had under Biden contributed to regional instability and also to instability in India's border areas. For example, Manipur ethnic conflict in part has been fueled by the inflow of arms and militants from Myanmar. And some of these arms that have flowed to Northeast India are actually Western weapons that have been supplied to the rebels in Myanmar. So it's very important for the US and India to work in a way that reconciles their policies towards India's neighborhood so that they can be effective partners in the larger Indo-Pacific region. And I think
and how do you view China's response, Professor Chilani? The way China issued a statement, you heard their Commerce Ministry when it said that there would be effective countermeasures should somebody have a deal with the United States of America that adversely impacts Chinese interests. Is that aimed at India? Is that aimed at Europe? Or is that a general signal that Beijing is sending out?
Gaurav, China is on the back foot because it doesn't have the same leverage in the trade war as the US. After all, China exports 5 times more goods to the US than what it imports. So obviously, it has a weaker hand compared to the US. And therefore, its own response to Trump's tariffs have been rather cautious and, they have been very careful not to do things that would actually cause further harm to the Chinese economy. And they have made it clear that they will not go beyond the 125% tariffs that they have imposed, even if Trump were to further hike the tariffs against China. That's because because of China's limited leverage with the US. And I think that this rhetoric from China about wanting other countries not to gang up with the US, this rhetoric, of course, shows. In fact, it highlights um, uh, Beijing's limitations. The fact that today, at a time when the Chinese economy is faltering, China is facing a deepening demographic crisis. It has been hit by unparalleled tariffs by the US, and this is going to have a significant impact on China's growth trajectory in the years to come. In fact, what Trump is doing is he's actually being very strategic. The tariffs are only one element in a bigger strategy of the Trump administration. He has also placed restrictions on chip exports to China so
Yes.
as to slow its advance in artificial intelligence and also to choke its military modernization. So there's a clear effort on the part of Trump to make China the focus of US policies and to contain China in different ways, technologically, economically, politically, diplomatically, which is why India becomes even more important for the Trump
Absolutely. That's
administration
the
foreign
point.
policy.
That's the point I was coming to, that if India is so important and India's importance will only increase, do we expect, a more conciliatory approach in that bilateral trade agreement negotiations? Or will the US also be a very tough negotiator? Because in areas like agriculture and dairy, there are certain red lines that India would also be, bringing across and trying to get that message across. Or that negotiation, we should leave to the negotiators and wait for the final outcome.
I think it's apparent that the Trump administration needs India more than India needs the US in a way, because the whole Indo-Pacific strategy of the Trump administration, in a way, relies on India being co-opted in that strategy. And it's partly because of this that the Trump administration is doing a course correction on India policy. And there are conscious efforts on both in New Delhi and in Washington to reestablish mutual respect and trust. So India has to negotiate in a manner to uphold its vital economic interests. It shouldn't be
Absolutely.
giving concessions the way, for example, before Modi went to the White House, India already announced a
Reduction in
reduction in some
tariffs on
tariffs.
Harleys.
That signaled weakness on India's part. And also,
Okay.
for example, now Reuters is reporting in recent days that India has already agreed to slash tariffs on over half of imports from America worth $23
Yes.
billion. That's about more than half of the total trade, more than half of the total trade surplus that India enjoys. And I think that India has to negotiate in a manner that it does not harm its economic interest, because its economy is very vulnerable at the moment, as we all know
Absolutely.
that India's economic growth has slowed, and the agricultural sector is politically very sensitive sector because
It indeed is, and we'll track that story very closely. Professor Chilani, for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. Over the next several days and weeks, Professor Chilani will stay with me as we discuss some of these aspects of taking this relationship forward and how countries like China, countries in the region and across the world view the coming together of these two democracies, strengthening their partnership. And earlier today, just a short while back, I spoke to Ambassador Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, India's former ambassador to the United States, about the Modi-Vance visit, the optics and the substance beyond the optics. Take a look. What are his impressions of India that you can share with us? I mean, of course, he's married to somebody from India, and we've seen him, celebrate festivals of our country, the entire family gathering together on Deepavali. But does that have an impact when there is a relationship between two countries? When President Trump's administration tries for America first, Prime Minister Narendra Modi tries for India first, and you have taken that relationship forward as India's ambassador to the United States of America. Do these personal relationships help tide over niggles and problems that may arise?
Of course they do. And you know that he met right at the start of his tenure. He met Prime Minister in Paris, and you already see him here. And as far as Indian Americans are concerned, he has a very good relationship. You know, in Ohio, the Indian Americans are quite a dominant presence. In fact, I know from the personal this thing, because my father and mother both studied in Ohio State University, where Vice President Vance has also gone. So Indian Americans already have a good relationship with him. And then you have mentioned about Usha, and you have seen him very respectful for Indian customs. And even if you read his book, I think he is quite open. So therefore, even here, you are showing the pictures. What was the first place he visited? I think the point definitely has gone home. But what is important? The important part here is that, look, the Prime Minister is very, very smart at the diplomacy part. And here is an important input giver in the United States political administration. And you have him here, and people here, Indians anyway are always very welcoming. Look at the visit of 2020 Feb, when President Trump came here and to Ahmedabad. I can tell you that any Republican senator and congressman I spoke at that time, just before the COVID hit, President Trump had already spoken about it. Also, this time when Prime Minister Modi was there, that's one of the things he remembered, 140,000 people coming and welcoming him.
Oh, absolutely, sir. In fact, I covered both Namaste Trump at Ahmedabad and Howdy Modi at Houston, Texas at the NRG Stadium. The energy there had to be seen, and I'm sure political leaders keep that in mind. But when it comes to the comprehensive strategic partnership between America and India, both the countries need each other. But is this BTA, one, it's an opportunity, but two, can it also lead to problems? Is it leading to problems, or will the two sides be willing to accommodate each other?
So see, Gaurav, any relationship has complications. Even our relationships at home have complications. They have to be tackled. So during Trump 1, there were issues, but they were tackled. During Trump 2, there are lots of issues. We are not talking just about United States and India. There is a worldwide issue of trade that is coming up. But if you look at the light within that, I think the Indian aspect, essentially the balance, will be much more easier achieved than many other complications. But you touched a very important point. That is the strategic relationship. Look, I think even a child can see that as the time is progressing, you are seeing some of the powers that are not that friendly to United States are already testing it. So as we move ahead, be a bit patient. I think this strategic relationship is only bound to go deeper, and it will flower more. I will only point to the Indo-Pacific strategy, which came out towards the end of Trump 1. If you look at it, you can see the important role which India was to play in his thinking. And I'm sure in this coming days, that will play a significant aspect in settlement of what you are looking at, some of the problems.
So that's a very significant point. If I were to read between the lines, it's a very, very major point that you're making here. This year, India is also hosting the Quad Summit, which we were to hold last year in the United the States of America. Wanted President Biden to host it as his farewell, Quad. But this year, when Quad Summit happens in India, President Trump will be here. How would you view the Indo-Pacific strategy moving forward?
Absolutely. A Quad will be. And if you remember, during Trump's first presidency, Quad was given a huge lift. And President Trump and his team at National Security Council at that time were very significantly invested. And here I may point out, incidentally, at end of his presidency, President Trump gave a highest award to all the 4 Quad leaders. And I had received it on behalf of Prime Minister Modi then. So Quad is a significant aspect. And when President Trump comes here, I'm sure you will see, and you can certainly be confident that the present establishment here will make it a memorable visit for President Trump.
Perhaps, I mean, his last visit to India was extremely significant in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and he's talked about it. And you also had a role to play in it in ensuring that he does come to India at a time when he seemed a little skeptical initially, and I'd love you to share that story. But I also want you to weigh in on the tariffs America has imposed on, one, China, 245% in instances, and on countries that are seen as very close to China, or China may use their ports to export to the United States of America. So there's a method in the madness in what Donald Trump appears to be doing, Ambassador.
Well, I don't want to be giving commentary on what's happening. You know that politics is complicated and international politics is certainly complicated. This is not the last word. And that's why I said just be patient and see how the negotiations proceed worldwide. I'm confident that India-US relationship is bound to deepen, and certainly some of the other aspects will play an important role. And here is an opportunity. There is no doubt that any country can't go it all alone. So there are significant aspects, and we have the international production system today in which you require reliable supply chains. And I do know that the United States certainly regards India as a reliable partner.
China has been, issuing, if I may, threats as some country view it, or warnings as some others may perceive it to be, that in case they want to do deals which adversely impact China's interests, there will be either consequences or countermeasures. How would you view that, sir?
So I think many of the countries around know the past conduct, and so it's no secret. But again, we have China as our neighbor, and I'm sure the current government is well aware of tackling China because it has. But that also points to, look, we never invited China to come to our border. They came on their own, and do keep that in mind. And therefore, I think it's very significant that the countries which have a similar attitude need to cooperate. And that is the significance also, especially the strategic significance of United States-India partnership.
And that's the question I wanted to come to, Ambassador. The strategic bilateral cooperation, India is also looking at, when you talk about trust in terms of high-end critical technology coming to India, co-production, co-development. Are we moving beyond words? When you were our ambassador to the United States, there was a lot of push to ensure ISET results in technologies being manufactured in India, resulting in greater manufacture in India. Do you see that progressing the way it was envisaged?
Look, there's a new understanding which had come out. They are calling it trust. but essentially the technology partnership is going to be important because India has the technology expertise, US has that, and do keep in mind that India has a very young population in an aging world. We have 50% of our population is 26 years and below. Now, it's true that things are moving towards AI, but keep in mind that AI also requires trained manpower. And where are you going to get that? You do need to feed in. That's only when AI will start giving you results. So India is going to be a significant player, and I'm sure this partnership, what is being called now as trust, is going to deepen more.
Ambassador Taranjeet Sandhu for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks.